Good morning. I'm Malcolm Young, the Dean of Grace Cathedral here in San Francisco. Welcome to the Forum winter season. We are the recipients of an incredible gift, a photographic work by artist David LaChapelle entitled Our Lady of the Flowers. It was unveiled yesterday in the south transept of the cathedral, and it's hung beneath the 23rd Psalm stained glass window. David attended high school at North Carolina School of the Arts, where he originally enrolled as a painter. While there, he began experimenting with photography, hand painting his own negatives before processing his film to achieve a full spectrum of color. At age 17, LaChapelle moved to New York City. Following his first photography show at Gallery 303, he was hired by Andy Warhol to work at Interview magazine. In the decades since, David has become one of the most published photographers in the world, and his work has expanded into music video, film, and stage projects. His work is exhibited internationally in galleries and museums in London, Paris, Rome, Washington, D.C., and New York, among many other cities around the world. Today, we're going to be talking about the story of Our Lady of the Flowers and his storied career. David, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much.
I was just saying this, David's about 4 time zones off from all of us, so I can imagine doing the forum at like 4 o'clock in the morning. You know, you've met and photographed so many different famous people. I wonder if you can talk about the people who stood out the most in your memory, and is there something about them that makes them, different than other people?
Yeah, I would have to say, of course, the early shoots. Your first time photographing. My first celebrity was Eartha Kitt.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that was pretty amazing. And I was 18. And she asked me we did this for this little downtown magazine, and it was funny because I went back to those negatives when I was putting my last book together, and I wanted to use one of them. And I went through the negatives thinking I would be different, but I went to the same exact photo I chose.
Oh, that's great.
When I was 18. And she was just great to work with, and afterwards invited me to come watch her record in the studio, and I went this winter, and afterwards she wanted me to walk her to the hotel, and I was walking her through Times Square, and a couple people recognized her, and she was in all this fur, and we got to the Carlisle Hotel, and we're walking up, and she turned around, and she goes, "I don't suppose you want to come up to my room?" And she looked up and down, and said, "I didn't think so." She's like, walked. So that was my first. I was like, I love this life. This is amazing. This is like tell this story many years later.
Yeah, I just think it's amazing too. You go back at the pictures and you choose the same one.
Yeah, and so that was a really fun memory, and I really knew who she was because I had worked at this playhouse, and she performed one night, and I brought my parents, and so I was like all into her.
Yeah.
And then later, I think one of the most profound experiences was Muhammad Ali, because I grew up. My father was a big fan of his, but I wasn't a boxing fan, but later, when I learned about his life and what he stood for, and to leave boxing at the height of his, powers as a young athlete, and just turn his back on all that money, never knowing if he could ever box again, or who might come up underneath. You have a crystal ball. You don't just have that much faith and belief of not going to fight in this corrupt war, and it's not against my religion, and that to me was so heroic, and then meeting him, I was so nervous, and he was very funny because he could see I was really stressed out, and he had Parkinson's at the time, but he was still doing really well, and he looked great, and I would turn around, and every time I turned around, he would start laughing because I was really kind of like short with my assistants and stuff, and I was tense, I was like, this is like Muhammad Ali, and normally I'm super relaxed, But that morning, I was like, really, it's Muhammad Ali. And every time I turned around, he kept laughing to get, I was getting more film. And then I realized every time I turned around, he was going like this, like to me. So my whole crew thought that was the best thing ever. Because what he was doing was breaking nuts, and I saw him, and then I started laughing, and then that just changed everything. Yeah. But he was so humble, and he stated he wanted to sign every single person. I mean, every crew member, every caterer, everyone who worked on this, there's lots of people in the studio and stuff, and he just wanted to, normally, we have a rule like don't ask people for photos and because it just lets them feel at home. And no, he wanted to sign everybody's anything and pose every photo with them, and he would like, put his boxing glove up. So I just saw like such humility in this giant. So all of that building himself up when he was a young man, he had to, because he was going to go on to fight by himself, and he had to like psychologically get himself to the point of like, I'm invincible, I'm the greatest. But in real life, he was actually so humble.
It's funny because I think because we grew up in the same time, in the same setting, he was a heroic figure for me too. I don't think I ever have remembered an athlete who took such principled stands and who was so articulate about it and who seemed
so articulate,
made it
witty
fun.
And funny.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
But one of a kind.
And exactly. Talk about somebody who suffered for the sake of his faith. It was just like he kind of burst out of the...
Never knew what would happen.
Yeah,
there could have been another boxer coming right underneath him. Never get his crown back, never get his license back to box, but he stood by his principles. And I just think that in this world today, where everybody's kind of fueled by greed, it seems, so much greed, and just more, and just people, I don't know, it feels that way. It feels like the world is kind of being ruled by this, this greed, and the love of money is root to all evil. It's not money itself, it's the love of it, right? So you kind of feel like everywhere you look, so many of these problems in the world are fueled by greed, know? And to have this athlete just turn his back on that, and he was living in his friends turned their backs on him, and he was living in this tiny little apartment, and he was the heavyweight champion of the world.
Right.
So think about that. That's a real hero.
I think it's great that you admire his humility. Someone on our staff that has met you in the last 5 days said you were our favorite one. Like of all the artists and everybody who comes to Grace Cathedral, that you were the one who touched this person the most.
Oh.
And it's so funny because I never, until this moment, realized that connection. It's like, because you're taking pictures of people as they're connecting with you. Do you know what I mean? So you are part of, you're kind of the mirror they're looking at when they're giving you that image. I wonder if you can talk a little bit about that relation between a photographer, an artist, and the subject.
Right. Sometimes you have a real close relationship, like Getcha, who's in The Lady of Flowers. That's my friend Getcha, and we're like brother and sister. So we have a very close relationship and super relaxed with each other, to the point where she'll complain and we'll fight. Or you guys knew what was going on behind the scenes, and then afterwards we're all close and loving but laughing and whatever. But we have our moments, like fighting like cats and dogs. But then it's just so many. Every situation presents a different, personality. Some that some that you don't know. And I've just found that having a really good crew around me, the best crew, and people who are kind, like people walk into the studio and they just feel the warmth, and they feel they're not, being stared at by a bunch of people dressed in black, like, oh, what are they wearing? I think they're the star, they're the one that looks good. Everyone's there to kind of, make them feel at home, and they're just genuinely really nice people that work at my studio.
I'm glad you mentioned about the Getcha too, because in a way, on one hand, there is that element of the two of you can bicker with each other, but it also means that she can open up in a way that she couldn't if it was me taking the photograph. And I do think that's an important part of Our Lady of the Flowers, is that there is a sense of compassion.
Right, and we share a really strong faith. She came from Haiti, and she would pray every day with her grandmother for hours. And really was to get off the island of Haiti, and she managed to do it, and have this life for herself, really being an orphan, now, so we have a lot of faith. We pray together, we go to church, so we share that, also, which I think really that gives us the motivation for the bigger picture. Never thinking it was going to wind up in Grace Cathedral. It was 3 years it took, and John Byrne, really was responsible for because I was like, they're not going to want that picture. They're going to look and see all this picture I did with Little King back in the day. They're going to be like, oh, no, we can't have him in our church. And I really, so having faith is great, but having people that have faith in you is really great too, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I have faith in the people I work with, but they they have more faith in me than I think sometimes I have in my.
I love when you talk about Getcha leaving Haiti. I mean, obviously your bio is like everywhere, but it's just like such a shallow. Your experience of it is so much deeper. But you were really on your own too at a really young age.
I was, but my parents lived close by.
Not that far. That's true. That's
they lived in Connecticut. And I didn't leave home because of them.
Yeah.
I mean, in fact, there were amazing examples of what my dad was. He found God in the church, as we spoke of. Earlier, my mom found God in nature. So I had these, like, sort of two examples but they're both very humble people. And even when my father became successful, he just was, talked to everyone the same, and he just kind of lived it. He didn't preach to us, and it wasn't pushed on me at all. I mean, he would pray with me at night, but it wasn't like, you have to go to church and that sort of thing. I just was drawn to it, and I didn't realize how much of an effect it had on me until I became around 17 or 18. I was really started getting into ideas of like where the soul goes and what is it, what does that look like? What does the soul look like? And trying to photograph the unphotographable in the East Village in New York, and mystical things, spiritual questions, religious questions, and what would paradise look like, and that was coming out of a time when AIDS was hitting really hard, and I was really young and living in this utopia of the East Village, and suddenly this dark cloud came, and it was like this scary disease that it was like COVID, but 100% fatal.
Yeah.
And it only affected a certain group of people.
Yeah.
Pretty much. And so there wasn't a lot of action done, and we joined ACT UP. And so being Grace Cathedral is so exceptionally profound to have the picture here because of the history of this cathedral. And I love this story, and if you could just tell it to my friends. I've tried to say it, and I've watched it, about the clergy who saw the young man crying, and I heard this, and I was like, I know this.
Yeah,
It's so mystical that the picture's here in this church. When St. Patrick's, we were protesting in ACT UP,
right?
Because they were really closing their doors, and you had Jerry Falwell at the time saying AIDS is God's punishment for being gay, and he was a very loud voice because there's only 4 channels on cable.
Right.
The 700 Club was 24 hours, and it was like, AIDS is God's punishment. And here are these people dying alone in shame, young people. Back then, a lot of people were kicked out of their families. They didn't have the support. So here's Grace Cathedral on the West Coast, in San Francisco, and this it all started with this experience that one of the clergy had with a young man in upstairs.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, I think what I loved about what you said yesterday when you talked about it, you said Jerry Falwell said AIDS is punishment, and he was wrong. I mean, this is not what Jesus' teaching was. Jesus' teaching was God loves every person without exception. And so what happened?
And I saw through that.
Yeah,
but a lot of my friends did it, and they hate Christianity, and they just with a passion, and it's they look at me like I'm crazy, and people in the art world. I mean, it's not, it's not like Jesus in the Jungle or Mary is not like a hot ticket at the gallery.
Right.
You know what I mean?
I do.
It's not.
Yeah.
So that's why I do my commercial work to support this work. To be able to make this work, because yes, I show it in exhibitions, but it doesn't mean that people are collecting it.
Right.
There's a lot of resistance right now.
Yeah.
We see it in the empty churches, but this church is so exceptional, and that's why it was so, that story. Can you tell it?
Yeah. Well, so I mean, so we were so alarmed, clergy at Grace Cathedral, that there would be people dying at San Francisco General Hospital who were dying alone. I mean, doctors and nurses were afraid to even care for them, and so we said that no one should die alone. And so we established a special chaplaincy for San Francisco.
And that was because of that encounter.
Yes, exactly.
Can you talk about that encounter?
Yeah. So I mean, there's a bunch of the history of gay people at Grace Cathedral is just extraordinary. So one is, I mean, in 1968, one of the readers got up to read the letter to the epistle, the reading from Paul's letter to the Corinthians, I think, and instead he read a manifesto about how the society is ostracizing and mistreating gay people, and it was a tremendously powerful statement, right there. And there will be people here today. You'll be upstairs who are here on that morning. They heard him.
Wow.
And the dean at the time let him speak. And he kind of started to go on a little bit and said, "Oh, it's time to wrap this up, but we'll have a chance to talk about this more." But so even in the 1960s, this was a conversation here in the Diocese of California and here at Grace Cathedral. And even the labyrinth, I didn't tell you this yesterday, we were talking about the labyrinths, but Lauren Artress was one of the people, she was the first woman who was a priest at Grace Cathedral, because having priests in the Episcopal Church only started in 1975.
Oh, okay.
And so she was the first one here.
Wow.
And she worked with people who had AIDS. And she gave everything of herself to this ministry until there was nothing left. Wow. And she needed to step back from it for a little while. So she wanted to come up with a religious practice that anyone could practice. You didn't have to believe something. You didn't have to, have a creed. You didn't have to have special instructions or teaching. And that's where that walking the labyrinth came from. Anywhere in the world that you see that labyrinth, it's connected to here at Grace Cathedral.
Wow.
And to the people who are ministering to people who are dying of AIDS. And we have clergy on the staff who had AIDS. We have or have AIDS. We have clergy in the diocese too. I mean, it's an extraordinary community, and that image of Our Lady with the flowers is part of that message to the world, that God loves everyone without exception. It's a perfect marriage. I mean, this is a place where you 100% belong, and in your art.
Yeah, I never thought it would happen to be in this place, but this is the perfect church to have my first.
One of the things I haven't talked to you at all about, but I would love to ask. I mean, part of the problem is we've been talking for the last 3 days, but I haven't talked to you about your mother. So I mentioned that I'm talking about a poet. The poet that I'm talking about lived in Lithuania, which is your mom's home.
Yes.
And I wonder if you can talk a little bit about her culture, her life, and just how she influenced you too.
Yeah, she was a very big influence. My mom was a refugee. She came, there was a war. She didn't talk a lot about Lithuania and the Baltic. She lived in the Baltic Sea. I heard a few stories, I know that they lived sort of, it's not off the grid. They didn't have electricity. They lived in a village that was very, very remote. And my grandfather was an ice fisherman. And, they would bury the vegetables in the winter with straw. So she really was going way back in time, And when she was 19 or 20, she came over on one of the last times at the end of the war, towards the end of the war, on a American battleship that they filled the hull with refugees. It came in right before Ellis Island closed. It was like last year or the year before, prior to it closing. So her family got into America. She went sent to the tobacco fields in Connecticut, and that's where she met my father after 3 days. And she was an artist that had to work in factories, had to take care of us, and work at convalescent hospital, whatever it was. Plus take care of us kids, which she did. And we had my grandmother on my mom's side also looking after us when she was at work. And but she was an artist. Everything she did super artistically. And I mean, really over the top. Like Easter, we'd come downstairs and she'd painted all these beautiful like Easter scenes of animals and baby animals and flowers coming in. They were really well done. And they're all in the windows. And we'd come downstairs and it was stained glass. So she kind of made magic for the holidays, but it was homemade. It was very. And very creative. We'd leave a carrot out for the Easter bunny, and then we in the morning I'd wake up and there's little powdered. I found out later it was powdered sugar. She made little footprints going to she gnawed on the carrot with a little knife or something. We're oh, they were here, So it's just all these really creative things. It was super creative, That and she was very much a perfectionist. How things were done, she was trying to master lasagna and went up for weeks. She made lasagna every night until she perfected it. And then we didn't see it again for a year. But when she made it, it was the best lasagna.
It's funny because, one of the things you said in passing yesterday was, or the day before, you said that your whole life I mean, even as a very young child, you knew you were an artist.
Yeah.
And I wanted to know more about that.
I think it started, well, I always was drawing and painting when I was little. When I started school, it was traumatic, and because I didn't really follow along a lot with what was going on. So I was just drawing my book, and then I remember around fourth or fifth grade, just really not knowing what was going on with long division and stuff. So I was like, I'm gonna be an artist, I'm not gonna need any of this. And so I just like, don't worry about it, you're gonna be an artist. I would just draw my books, you know? And then at 15, I dropped out because bullying, and it was just like, you know, I just didn't fit in the public school system at all. So I went to New York.
Yeah.
And it kind of like a truant that just became more of a, after you miss 3 times, it's 3 letter grades. I figured, well, I already
never
have
get
an
caught
F,
up.
so why bother?
Yeah.
So I would just go to, the train was really close to the school, so I'd take the train to New York, and I was a truant that just, you know, let it become not going to school at all. So it was kind of slowly at first, and then it was just sort of, I didn't stop going. So I missed my sophomore and junior year. And then my senior year, I had this crazy, it was like a miracle that, you know, I'd heard about this school in North Carolina, School of the Arts, and you didn't have to pay to go there, you just have to have good work, and it was kind of like, you had to audition to get in, and my father came to collect me in the East Village after working in nightclubs, and I was still going to art classes and stuff. I was sneaking into the Art Students League and doing life drawing and things, but he drove me down to the school, and I put my work out, and you know, by the time we drove down there, I really wanted to be at school. I wanted that structure, and I was, you know, my parents were worried. I mean, I dropped out there. My dad was the first in his family to go to college. My mom being a refugee, you know, school was everything. But they understood I was really different, you know, and that I had my own sort of, and you know, that I was good at drawing. So anyway, I got into the school. That's where I learned photography. But that school was incredible. It really, it changed my life. People say, what was your big break? That was getting into that school. I remember the dean, he liked I could tell he liked my artwork, but then he got my report cards, and I had to go in with my dad, and each of the students went in with their parent, you know, into this room, and then they came out happy or sad. Like, oh, here, you know, you're all nervous, and I go into this room with my dad, and he opens up my report cards, and my heart just sank, because I knew it was just gonna be like, you know, straight Fs on, you know, for 2 years. And he just looked at it, and he was just a really funny guy. He was like a total 70s dude, like tall with, you know, the mustache and the aviator glasses. Like he was just like, our dean was really cool. And he was just going through the papers, and he was like, you flunked tennis. And he kind of like smiled a little bit, and that's when I knew I got in. He was like, out of all the things, you flunked tennis.
So who were some of the teachers you had?
Dean, I mean, Clyde was the best. He changed my life. You know, he let me come back in there, and we had a crazy, intense relationship because, yeah, we had, you know, a lot of feuding and stuff, but it was really great. You know, at the end of, I finally did get a diploma. And I couldn't graduate because I didn't have enough credits on them. But my mom got to live long enough to see me get a doctorate from the school, and I gave it, you know, coming down there and seeing all my old teachers and stuff.
That's so cool.
Really
I just love
incredible.
that part. The honorary doctorate, that's what they're for. You know, you're completely right. Just to fix something that was wrong
and
before.
to, you know, give the commencement address, and I just told everybody, like, it's not what you're going to get from the arts. What can you give the world that the world needs to see? What's the world hungry for? And that's what I kept my talk about with them, was like, what are you going to give? You know, and even if you can't make it, because a lot of the school were dancers. I still love photographing dancers. And I knew they weren't all going to get into the companies that they thought they would.
Right.
And I said, so, but this training that you got at the school, you can apply to something else, even if your life takes a different direction. And they always say, like, bang on the door and don't ever stop, just try to. But sometimes you have to go down the hall and find another door that's open that still will lead you, you know,
to a great place.
Yeah, because I started in fine art.
Yeah.
And I wasn't selling my pictures. People in the 80s weren't really collecting photography that much, definitely not mine. And so I started I lucked out and Interview Magazine hired me. So
Tell
that
us
led
about
to the
Andy
world.
Warhol. What was your experience of him? I mean, we've all seen
He
him.
gave me my first home in the magazine, so that was like my college. Being in that environment and seeing, somebody work at that level and just.
What was he like? And what?
Really funny and just very kind, very generous, and just a really good guy. I mean, he told me, just do whatever you want, just make everyone look good. and he would get a kick out of the outfits I was wearing because I would dress really crazy back then. I was like, expressing myself through like my friends.
So what kind of crazy things did you wear?
My friends would make crazy clothes.
Yeah.
Just designers and stuff. And it was this, yellow and black striped, like jumpsuit, like new wave-ish, new romantic. I don't know. There's a lot going on.
Yeah, completely.
It was a lot. I mean, at 19 you can pull it off, or 18, but yeah, some stuff I wouldn't wear today necessarily.
Yeah, definitely. So you got started, and then how did that lead to your next steps in your?
Well, that just kind of led the door to magazines, and I started working a lot. I started shooting celebrities for them, and the Beastie Boys was one of my first assignments for them, and just they more and more and more, and I learned about deadlines and making deadlines, and so it was really like a great like my university of getting published in photography. And back then magazines were really important, which the whole world's changed now. And magazines are not what's really important anymore. As far as being a photographer, people don't look at magazines anymore. So they asked me to do a master class early on when that series first started, and I said I really can't, for two reasons. One was that I really wouldn't know what to tell a young photographer how to get started, and I think that's an important thing. I think that's why a lot of people would pay for that masterclass. And the second reason was because I couldn't talk about my process, which is a lot of it involved praying and and meditating and praying and asking God for direction on and praying before shoots, whether they're just secular shoots or the more ones that we're doing now, which are really centered on very like the Holy Family, basically, and celebrating the Holy Family, honoring the Holy Family. So there'll be a lot of prayer going on, and if I can't talk, because you can't really charge money and then tell people, oh, I prayed before a shoot. Like, I want my money back. So I was like, if I can't talk about that, that's omitting something that's because everyone wants to know about process. Like, well, that's a part of my process, because honestly, sometimes I just step out of the way and things just unfold, and it really is. You think everything's so planned and something, especially photography that I do, because it's not, I'm not reportage. It's everything's set up. I set up these tableaus and everything's posed and there's props and all these things. But you would be surprised like how many things just happen, like without my controlling it. Like they'll just fall into place. It's really something else, And that's when I kind of just step out of the way and like. You do feel like a channel that you're like letting God work through you sometimes, And really, and those are the best pictures. Yeah. Those are the ones that are like, wow, this came. I mean, and you really didn't feel like you just felt like. So many times I'll learn what the picture's about after I take it. I'm like, oh, and that, in this photo, I remember we're doing the Annunciation, and there's always usually a book, and there's a book near her because it's sort of. In all the historical paintings. Right. And I just put this book in because I just felt it, But my friend's like, did you know that they always put a book in the paintings next to Mary? I'm like, I didn't know that. I just felt like she needed a book. Intuition. Yeah, it's kind of like being guided, and it's really amazing. So, yeah, that's definitely part of the process.
Yeah, well, one of the most interesting things when you talk about that, I mean, I was talking about this to our daughter about your career, and I think there was the sense that I had, maybe 20, 30 years ago, that there was this normal way that you go through, but technology changes everything so substantially that, I mean, the way that you went through your career, it'll never be done that way ever again, because you had to be our age in order to have the experience we had in the 70s. cable television didn't exist when we were young children, but it did exist when we were coming into high school. The video revolution, MTV, the beginning of digital, internet,
that
social media,
kind of
digital photography,
and magazines.
Yeah, magazines, totally. Like, who would ever imagine that? I mean, it's hard to even describe to our children just how important magazines were.
It's so important.
Yeah.
You go by the magazine stands and just want to see what was going on in the world, whether it was pop culture, just, like the photo magazines, like Life and Look, growing up with those. I remember seeing Woodstock, pictures of Woodstock, my parents' Life magazine. Like, I want to be there with the older kids. I was like 5 or something,
Yeah.
They're in the mud, naked. I want to go there.
I know, really. That looks like
They're
fun.
in the mud, naked. How come I can't be there?
Yeah, it's funny. And those images are, just the image of Neil Armstrong on the moon, the first image of the moon rise over the sun, the Earth planet rise over. There's like these iconic images, and it just doesn't quite exist like that anymore. I wonder if you can talk about what it was like, kind of moving from still photography into video, magazines,
that was kind of a natural progression. I love music, and so working for music videos, and then I did this documentary called Rise on this dance phenomenon that was happening in Los Angeles called Crumping, but was also about the neighborhood and an alternative to gangs, and there was a big, church element to it too, because a lot of these kids made their own families and had church families, and so it's how that church, the black church in South Central is really is sort of the infrastructure of the neighborhood. So that was an important story to tell. It wasn't just about dance. Dance was a release, but it did inspire like Step Up, and all that whole series came from Rise. And Rise, that was sort of a turning point in my life. After that, I found the place in Hawaii, and I really wanted to go back to starting, First, I was going to just stop photography, and I went to Maui, bought this old nudist colony, and then, I really felt I had some more pictures in me. And about 6 months into it, I was like, gosh, I really do feel like I want to have some more pictures. And we got this call from a gallery, would I show in Germany, and they had a budget for me to make new pictures. I was like, yeah. And that's when I did the Deluge series, and this series called Awaken, and it was sort of, the Deluge was from the Sistine Chapel, from the scene of Noah, but in modern times. And I set it in Las Vegas, and it was a very kind of epic mural you'll see at the exhibitions. But that really started me back to where I first started, which was in galleries. My first shows were in galleries in New York, in my friend's apartment, and some little downtown galleries, which led to magazines. So then coming back full circle, I'm so happy I had that experience, because, it brings so much to the new pictures that I'm doing. They're very connected to the pictures I was doing in the 80s. Yeah. And it's like a full circle, also in the sense that, at the exhibitions, a lot of kids are coming. It brings in tons of young people to these exhibitions. And my other friends who are artists are like, gosh, you got so many young people coming to your shows. And because they're there for Travis Scott or Dua Lipa or Lady Gaga or whoever, and they'll come in and they may see some of those pictures. They'll be somewhere, but they'll be represented in a very much smaller way. And what they will see is a lot of the newer pictures from the last 15 years, and which is mostly very, much on the path that I'm in now, which is really trying to, bring just as much light and kind of be the, antidote to what I see happening in popular culture right now, and to me that is all. Sometimes beauty and really great things inspire you, and also simultaneously negative things can inspire you, or bad things can inspire you. When I see what's being offered on Netflix, and there's, there were 5 separate offerings on Ted Bundy, for instance, the serial killer, but not one on Stevie Wonder. Yeah. One of the greatest living artists of all time, a prophet of music, and won more Grammys than anyone else for Best Album. Like, we don't have a documentary on him, but we have 5 on Ted's, 5 different, drama series. So what is this obsession with murder? It's in the Bible. It's like we're not supposed to be obsessed with this stuff or look at it. It's not something we're supposed to be taking in. And I see that, and it just makes me want you know, that if popular culture is a reflection, you know, or art is a reflection on contemporary society, so art or history is really art history too. When people study history, they're looking at the art, they're looking at the architecture and how the people lived, and they putting the puzzle pieces together, the anthropologists. So we study a culture and what they valued through their art. What was important to them is through their art. It's reflected in their art and their belief systems. And if we look at around today, what people are really looking at, it's not necessarily museums, it's really what they're watching on Netflix and what they're, you know, those type of things they're watching.
Yeah,
So much of it is.
You're so right. I mean, the things I see are just horrifying. And you're right. I mean, Netflix has like a reach that like Time magazine had in like the 50s. I mean, it's just, it is the way.
Things being made.
Yeah.
That
the people
there's not
seeing.
really an alternative. That's the thing. You look in music, and I mean, you go back very briefly, and there was so many genres. There were so many genres of rock. They had categories of rock.
Yeah.
There's not a rock band or an alternative band or folk music. You know, the people who were singing of things that were a little bit deeper, or you had Stevie Wonder and Prince and artists that were bringing something to the world, even, you know, as recent as Prince. And it's gotten very narrow, that sort of popular culture. And yet, of course, there's always going to be the band, but I'm talking about like sort of zeitgeist bands, you know, that were like the Beatles, bringing us Let It Be, or, you know, there was a time in music where there wasn't Christian rock and secular music. It was all mixed together. So you had Jesus Is Just All Right With Me by the Doobie Brothers. You had Spirit in the Sky, which was #1. You had Let It Be. You know, you had so much music that was okay talking about God or Jesus, and now that would be taboo.
You don't see it so much, exactly.
Really,
well, in a way, it's again connected to all this change of technology, and that we at least had radio stations that we were all listening to, and now we can listen to finer. But you know, one of the traditions we have on the forum, I forgot to tell you about this, is that we take questions from the audience.
Okay.
So Rebecca and Nessa will assemble their questions and bring them to me. One of the things I keep thinking about, because I've seen you get photographed now like 50 times because everybody wants to take your picture. Do you have any advice to ordinary people who are taking pictures, like how to make our pictures a little bit nicer?
Selfies, I have no advice.
Maybe not selfies, but I mean, even
use a flash.
Use a flash.
Use a flash.
That's good advice.
After a certain age, flash is great.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
That is good advice.
Yeah.
Yeah, completely.
Even outside, full flash.
Yeah, full flash, exactly.
You know, it's so funny in photography. You know, going all the way back, you can talk to your family albums and stuff, and you'll show like the family photo, and it's like the last photo ever of Aunt Mary or something, and people will just look at the photo and be like, "Do I have a double chin?" Before, like, they'll look at Aunt Mary and they're just like, "How do I look?" You know, like they all go. Everybody wants to look good. It's kind of a human thing, you know. And I think Andy was right. Like, do whatever you want, just make everyone look good.
Yeah, you know? I like that. You know, I mean, that's a good there's good lessons for life.
Yeah.
You know, I wonder if you can talk a little bit about where the inspiration for Our Lady of Flowers comes from, because this will be archived. You know, at Grace Cathedral, we have so much art that speaks to me so deeply, and I know so little about the artists. I mean, that's part of the joy of having you be here, to be able to talk a little bit about it. So maybe you can describe the picture and then talk about how it came into being.
Well, I was doing a lot of pictures. We did the Annunciation with Getcha around that time, maybe a few months earlier, and I really loved Getcha's face. She has kind of a Russian icon like face that when she relaxes her eyes, and she just, to me, looks like one of those Russian icons on the altar. And she was there, you know, kind of staying in Maui, so she was, you know, like handy because she was right there. So it's really the people around me. I'm always putting them in photographs, especially friends. And I had been getting more into this. I didn't know that much about Mary, and I started, and I learned the rosary, and I was starting to do the rosary every once in a while, and I'm really feeling something when I did it, and really trying to focus on the words and doing it outside in nature, in gardens and stuff. And I think I love the female representation in the idea of the Holy Family, or just in religion in general, having the sort of intercessory where you don't, worship her in a sense, but she's sort of someone you can pray to that can help, like the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
You know, it's just, for me, it's really nice to have that female representation, the mother.
Yeah.
You know, and the Pietà has been a theme in a lot of my pictures, and that was, you know, the symbol of greatest loss is a mother losing a child.
Wow.
And just wanting to do this beautiful photo because I know, you know, I love the story of the Virgin of Guadalupe. I love what's the other one? Was she appeared in Italy?
Yeah, Lord.
Was it
Our
Lourdes?
Lady's Lourdes, yeah.
Was she
in France?
In France.
Yeah.
And there's one in Italy with little children. Which one? Fatima.
Fatima.
Yes,
yeah.
yes, thank you.
Portugal.
In Portugal, Fatima. Yeah, so I love these stories of apparitions because I kind of didn't know what to think of all that when I was growing up and stuff. And then I had a sort of a strange experience myself, and I was like, wow. I was with a friend, to someone I work with, and we both saw it. I was like, okay. And I know that, you know, that only happens in very humble places in the world, like apparitions and visitations.
So you had that kind of experience as a child, like as a young person?
And actually more recently than that, yeah, as an adult. And I knew, and I was with a friend, and it was just something that I think we needed something that time to show us we were on the right track, that we were doing the right thing. And it happened, and it was, I couldn't even sleep that night. Yeah. You know, it was you know, for weeks I was just, you know, so then I started thinking, you know, when there's these appearances or very mystical things happening around the world, it's always in countries like the Philippines or Guadalajara or places where people have just really strong faith but are going through a very, very tough time, you know, either with a famine or with some sort of lack, you know, and they're very humble people, and, you know, you're not having apparitions of Mary or Jesus in sort of, you know, affluent places. I mean, Jesus never slept in a city. He would always leave the city to sleep outside in the gardens at night or in the olive trees or wherever. He wouldn't stay overnight in the city. And sometimes in cities, people are so sophisticated and there's a lot of scoffers. Yeah. People that will be like, oh, that's not an apparition. That's a reflection of light off that thing. And yeah, that may be the physical cause of it. You know, but that also doesn't take away the fact that it is an apparition. You know, if the face of Jesus maybe is a rust stain or something, people scoff at it like, oh, those hillbillies down there seeing Jesus in the rust stain. Well, maybe those people needed to see that, you know, and maybe that, you know, so we don't know, you know, and I think to have an open mind about
how
those
does it
things.
feel for you? Because people are going to have that experience of Our Lady of the Flowers. They're going to have those kinds of experiences here at the cathedral. So,
well, you know, I know that there's a power in art, and I would really hope that would affect someone, you know, and people visiting the cathedral, and you know, of course, you can't expect it to happen for everyone, but just if it would happen to anyone, it'd be a great thing.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah, exactly.
Have it here is it's pretty amazing, you know.
Yeah. I was just actually reading the letter that you first sent us about this. Can I read just like a section from this?
Sure.
So this is like this is what David wrote for us. As a young photographer, I grew up during the AIDS epidemic, and my early work was deeply influenced by ideas of life, death, and the metaphysical. Since then, I've maintained a strong connection to God and believe it has not only kept me alive, but given me direction in my work and life. I try to listen to God's direction in my work and purpose as an artist. As I've matured, I understand the need to be vigilant in my purpose, which is to make imagery that brings light to the world, especially in a time when there is so much confusion and darkness. And it must have power for you even now to hear those words. It was the beginning of a great friendship. Okay, so here's a question. You are only 60, lots to go. What is your...
That's funny hearing that.
Yeah, well,
the first time.
Well, I mean, it's good to be reminded that
what happened last night?
Okay, good. Well, we have so many...
Yesterday.
I have so many friends in their 90s, and they're like, oh, if I was in my 50s again. Right. Okay, so she said, so you have a lot to go. What is your frontier? Where are you going next, artistically or otherwise?
Well, thank you for the question. I'm making a series this week. We're starting, and there was a lot of praying went into this, but Stations of the Cross that we're photographing this week, and that was incredible too. Talk about getting out of the way. I was very confused as whether I was to do this or not, and I was out in Maui and I was alone a lot, and I kept thinking I really want to do Stations of the Cross, but I didn't know if it was my idea or just something I was, because. So one night I was having a lot of roadblocks, and I was looking for the right person to do it. And first I was going to put a lot of different people portraying Christ, and then that was a bad idea because I thought that would look like I was just trying to be woke or something, and I didn't want to do that. And so I just said, okay, let me just find someone who looks like they're from the Middle East. And then this person didn't work out, so I was just thinking, maybe I'm not supposed to do this because it's not flowing at all, and I'm having a really difficult time doing it. So I prayed. And I was just asking God, like, really, please help me know if I meant to do this or not. And I woke up the next morning at 6 a.m. and it's like there was this Italian rapper that had wanted me to do an album cover, and I heard about it. I just thought, Italian rappers are gonna have tattoos all over the place because Italians have more tattoos than any other country in the world per capita. And all the rappers are really trying to extra to be like American rappers, so there's more gold and there's more tattoos and it's more like, violent and crazy. And I just thought, I wasn't really thinking about this guy at all. This project that was being offered up, but I woke up in the morning like 6 a.m. kind of woke up with this thought like the Italian rapper, and I'm like, Italian rapper. So I went up. I was staying in my cabin. I went up and I called my agent and I said, "What's the guy's name?" The Italian rapper. And I looked him up and. I've been searching for a Christ face, that really had empathetic eyes.
Yes.
It was really about the eyes, because we could fix the hair and the beard and everything, but I just needed those eyes that look very merciful and poetic and loving and forgiving. That has to come through the eyes. So when I looked at him, he has no tattoos, and he had this long hair and these incredibly profound, like, they call him the poet.
Wow.
That's his nickname in Italy.
Yeah.
And here he was, like, coming in, and all the time I was praying about earlier, I'd have this, like, still small voice saying, it's coming to you. You don't have to struggle with this. You don't have to struggle. I was really struggling. I was like, I gotta get the right guy. And why haven't you found him? Have you put those things? I was calling Los Angeles and talking to the studio, like, you gotta put a casting out, and there's gotta be all this street, and just have to find the right person. And just getting kind of anxious about it and stuff. And then I just let go, and then he was already there. He was coming to me.
Yeah, wow.
And so I had him on a Zoom call like 2 hours later at 8 a.m. And he's in Italy, and we talked about it as an album, and he wants to do the Divine Comedy.
Wow.
But he doesn't want to depict hell like in the gross,
exactly.
like sequins, burn, like red sequin, none of that. He just thought of it as isolation, which is how I think of hell, as like isolation, separation from God for eternity.
Yeah.
So knowing that you could have been in touch with them, okay, losing that. So this idea of like isolation would be hell, and then heaven is going to be shot in Maui, and then purgatory is sort of kind of William Blake's that we're building. I talked to him about some of those ideas that we're just formulating, and then I said, can I talk to you in a few days about this other project I might have that you might be good for? So 2 days later, we had another call, and I said, I'd love to put you in our project. And he said, I'd be so honored. And I was like, this is the perfect person, because he's excited to do it. He's a performer, and he just looks, you look at his picture and it really comes through, and they call him the poet. And
perfect.
He's even got the long hair. It was really
that's great. I love it.
And it just fell like that. But I woke up with the thought.
Yeah.
And
That's what happened with me. That Thoreau book, that came, 3 o'clock in the morning, I woke up, I'm like, I'm going to study Thoreau, and I'm going to write a book about it. I woke up at 3 o'clock.
Was that something that was gestating in your mind, or was that something that was a sort of
there's like 50 different projects I could have done. And
so this one just woke you up. So for me, I feel that's sort of divine inspiration.
Yeah. Well, here's our next question, 2-part question. Oh yeah, I'd love to ask about this. Who is your most and least favorite person to photograph?
Oh.
That wasn't quite what I was going to ask, but it's a good one.
Yeah, I guess the most favorite was, so there's something to learn from everybody from the bad experiences. I guess at least the kind of the worst experience, because there was so much expectation, and my studio manager was so in love with her at the time in the 90s. we kind of grew up with Madonna, and that was sort of about, photographing her was always a bad experience.
Yeah.
It was just tense and stressful for everybody, and she just made everybody feel bad.
Yeah.
Kind of just.
I can imagine.
Even her team, they were so stressed out
Yeah.
and tense, and the shoots were so tense, and there was just no joy in it at all.
Yeah.
My gosh, if you're having such a bad time doing it, what's the point of being
Well, I can also imagine
rock.
too the times too. I mean, the two of you were were so much in the public eye, and I can imagine that making things worse too.
Well, they asked the question. Normally, I wouldn't talk about it, but I'm at church.
Yeah, completely. That's a great answer.
Yeah,
So how about how about the best?
Well, like I said,
Yeah,
Muhammad Ali, there's been so many, been really good relationships with people. Butterfield Elton John has been really fun because it's been like 20-something years now working with him. A lot of, each one has their own little idiosyncrasies and characteristics and stuff, but I think the variety is also what makes it really fun to photograph different types of people, and sort of just everyone's a star, treating everybody the same,
Right, exactly. Everyone's a child of God. Before computers and digital, how did you construct your photos?
The same way I do now. I think analog. I grew up in analog. I grew up printing and processing my own film, and spending 6 years in the black and white lab, printing all my photographs, and 6 years in color, so 12 years. And so it's either in a dark room, a photo studio, or a nightclub. So they're called the dark ages of my life. I was having a lot of fun, though. In the
Sounds
East Village.
fun.
Yeah, it was fun. But I spent a lot of time printing. And so my analog photographs, you can't tell that are next to the digital ones. The digital is a much better way to work for the environmentally, just for a lot of reasons. You don't have to process all those chemicals. And
this person has other questions. It says, do you have a religious upbringing? And what inspires your religious themed world?
Yeah, definitely. My dad didn't force us to go to church with him, but I would go even as I got older, because I was the youngest, so I'd come home and my mom, she didn't go, so I would go to church with my dad still, so I had Sunday school for a while, but like I said, it never really pushed on us that much, but I think it was just that door was opened, and it was something that I gravitated towards.
Yeah. So here's another question. Do you have thoughts to share about Richard Avedon and his work?
I love Richard Avedon. My first book ever was a photo book. Before I ever thought I was going to be a photographer, I begged my dad to help me get this book. I was like 11 years old or something. It was 1947. 77, I really wanted this book, and it was at the mall for half price, and my dad got it for me, and I just poured over this book all the time. And I think, having a book is so different from social media, because so Avedon put every single one of those, he chose all the photos, put them in the order he wanted. Like, this was his masterwork, and every decision, all his compositions. So it was the best of the best hair and makeup people, the best styling, the best compositions, the best, the way he would get people interacting and flying through the air. And it was different from the others. It was just something else deeper going on with his photographs. And I just think pouring over this book so much, I really knew from a young age, like, sort of what was, if I couldn't get the best hair makeup on a celebrity, I would just let's just do no makeup at all, and that would work.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And wet hair. If I couldn't get it, and that when you're starting out, you have to think about stuff like that, because, doing celebrities, like, a bad hair and makeup can really ruin the photo forever.
Yeah, totally. Well, I love the idea too that you had this idea of what was really good available to you.
Mm-hmm.
Like, little did your father know. I mean, he was giving you.
Well, I begged him for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But little did he know. I mean,
I didn't know I was going to be a photographer. I was just so attracted.
Neither of you did, but I mean, it was
I thought it was really
opened a door.
mathematical and scientific,
Yeah,
so I was scared of it
at
first. And I realized it was so intuitive, photography, even the darkroom.
So this is the other question this person asked. To this day, does sketching, drawing, and painting ever free you for your photography?
It's funny. I was telling a friend of mine, Johnny, who was such a big part in getting this. I want to thank Johnny for. It really was Johnny's work getting this photo here, and so thank you, Johnny. I mean, I have a great team. With Johnny was like spearheaded the whole Grace Cathedral. We're going to do this. I'm like, I don't think they want it. They want it. It's going to happen. Don't worry. But
by the way, I wanted it really badly.
oh, good. Yeah, no, I forgot the question.
So the question is, does writing, drawing, painting?
Oh, right. Yeah, so I was telling Johnny there too, like, you know, when I started taking photographs since the School of the Arts, I remember never finishing a drawing, and I drew and painted obsessively since I was little. And when I took my first roll of film midway through the year, we had a photography class, it was it for me. I mean, the first roll of film was, Tri-X, 36 frames, at frame 17 or 18. Everything up until the first part of the contact sheet is like, stairs with a shadow on, like really typical high school, a crack in the wall, like just, super bad. Yeah. And then I had all my friends in my dorm room kind of undressed in sort of these Renaissance poses, like all the dancers, like in the, like one's dying slave, doing all these Michelangelo poses. Yeah. And I was like, this is it. That was my first day with a camera, and then printing those pictures, and that was it for me. Like the adrenaline of a shoot was so exciting that going back to drawing now, it's like, I just don't, there's not, it's like it's really hard for me. I'll do thumbnails and I'll do thumbnail sketches and stuff, but it's really hard to paint again because I'm so used to that buildup of adrenaline and excitement, that's what I want to like, it's hard to get excited about. That's drawing. Right. But it used to be everything for me. Yeah. But I remember never finishing a drawing after picking up a camera.
Yeah. Yeah, so this person writes about drawing as praying. Art photography. How do you make it more accessible to all art galleries? It can be out of reach for many, yet there's so many stories to tell about this project. I can't read it quite because the handwriting's not great.
So how do you make it more accessible? Well, I think having it and having your work in a place like Grace Cathedral makes it more accessible than just having it exclusively in galleries or museums and things like that. So this is really an incredible gift, and to be able to have my picture here at a place that's not that people come for many different reasons, not just to see art or to pay to get in to see art. So this is really wonderful. This is a perfect example of getting pictures into a place that is accessible. Yeah,
it really is. I wonder if you can talk, just as you look back on your whole history of your whole art career, if you see different stages that you went through, or, and I wonder too, if are there particular pieces of art that you've created that have had a lasting influence in just how you see the world in particular, things that you especially remember?
I remember in the Angel series I did when I was 18, and I had taught me a lot about having, investing in myself as an artist, and had $2,000 in the bank, and I needed to get these angel wings made. And it was really a calling. Like I had to get these wings made. It took me 2 years to find the person to do it in New York, and I had this money saved up. It was all I had in the world, and I found this prop maker, and I said the wings have to have muscles, and I had designed them so they went down the back because this is analog, so there was no digital getting rid of stuff. So that's why my work is still very much analog today, because I think analog. So I set up all the tableaux, so you don't really tell the difference between the old and the new, because I was always doing things that were sort of the unphotographable. Yeah. So I designed these wings, and they had muscles, and it looked like they could lift the person off the ground, and the feathers all had to be going in the right direction. So I was explaining this to this prop maker, and I needed 4 sets, and then the wires went down the back. It was copper tubing, and then it was a weightlifter's belt that held it up, and I put a loincloth over it. So they looked like they were just coming off the person's shoulders, and they were big enough to lift them off the ground. They were really had muscle, and then they were just these beautiful white wings. He made me 4 pair. And he wanted 2,500, and I had 2,000, so I gave him that, and he said, okay. And I got my wings, and that was a really important series, and it has given back so much and still being, exhibited today, and shown me that, don't be afraid to, spend whatever you need to spend, or make, whether it's time or money, to make exactly how you want it.
And it's right to try to express the inexpressible. That the life of the Spirit calls us each individually to try to put something beautiful in the world about that experience of being God's child.
Yeah, and just that, putting the care into things and how they look, and sort of honoring, especially with these works, we wanted to really honor God, and me and Glenn, who's here from Los Angeles. There he is. We were looking at the picture yesterday, we never thought it would wind up in Grace Cathedral, and we went back and forth on burning in the sky, like the blue on the sky, like how dense it should be or not. And we went through so many work prints to really get that right color balance, and we're like, it was worth it. Look. It was like all that. Sometimes you're doing it, you're like, is someone gonna notice this? And then you just get these little fleeting doubts, but it always pays off. It always putting that extra into anything, it's always worthwhile.
Yeah, I'm so sad because this is like our last time together. The interview just went by so quickly, and I still have 50 more questions to ask you. But we're wrapping things up, and I wonder if you can talk a little bit about signs of hope that you see going forward.
I think we have to look at our own lives. That's where we find the signs of hope, which are inside of us, and it's sort of, things may look a certain way out in the world, but we walk by faith, not by sight.
Yeah.
So having that in your heart, knowing that things may look this way and look bad, and wars may seem to be brewing over here or over there, or the economy or whatever, those are the way things look. But we walk with our faith, and in our own lives we'll have signs, we'll have those signs of hope and encouragement that if we ask for those, just God, give me a sign of hope for whenever you want, just give me the sign of hope. And a lot of that is within us already, and it'll just come to the surface. Like you'll wake up with the inspiration to write that book, or I'll get that sign of encouragement and hope about, okay, this time wrap is going to be perfect, hopefully for this project coming up. But I do feel that it will be. I have this feeling of this is, as soon as I prayed and got out of the way, I just had my answer, And that's I guess that's what I would say. So the world can look dark and confusing, and just what we have to be mindful of what we look at, what we take in, what we think of as entertainment. We have to be careful about those type of things, because they do affect us. Or too much watching the news can affect us, and and actually picking up the Bible ourselves and reading it, because it'll speak differently to each of us. That's why they call it a living Bible. So what might be interpreted by one person one way, it'll mean something else to us, because this word reminds us of something, and that's why it's alive, and we can pick up the Bible and get so much out of it.
Yeah, that's why I loved your title, The Good News for Modern Man, because that was the title of the translation that was most influenced our generation, because it came in the 70s.
Yeah, I had a copy of that.
I'll tell you.
My first gallery.
Yeah, same
show.
with me. That's what people gave. It was what you gave kids in the 70s. But I gotta say, David, you are such a light to me. I'm so grateful for your work, for your love of humanity, for your desire to bring goodness into the world. It's been such a blessing having you here. And I'm glad this is the beginning of a long-time relationship. We'll always be here for you.
Thank you so much. It's been such an incredible experience, coming here to San Francisco the first time and meeting Mahogany and seeing the church and getting the story of the history of the church. And the more I'm hearing, the more I'm just like, wow, this is one of those signs of hope, and one of those signs of things that are meant to be, that really, will fuel me for the to make more images
for the next
more
projects
things.
completely.
And in all of our lives, we'll find these like moments that will keep us going.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
This is a big one. This is a big one.
Definitely. Well, I hope you all go upstairs and get a chance to see the image. There's so many people yesterday said, when I went to see the Mona Lisa, I was so disappointed. And when I saw this, I was just amazing. So go and see it. It's in the south transept, so directly above us. And immediately after that, we will have the 11 o'clock service. You're welcome to join us. Everyone's welcome to receive communion at Grace Cathedral, too. We're going to be taking a break from the forum for the next couple of weeks as we prepare for Easter, but on April 16th, my guest will be Rhonda McGee. Dr. McGee is a professor of the law school at the University of San Francisco. She's an internationally known mindfulness teacher and practice innovator with a focus on applying mindfulness to the hardest challenges of our times. I can't wait to talk to her. She's an extraordinary person. So you're welcome to join us and support us on the forum. Gifts of any size make a difference. You can give in many different ways, including at gracecathedral.org. And again, David, thank you so much for bringing your light into the world.
Thank you so much.